Picture this. It is a crisp Tuesday morning in your backyard. The sunlight cuts through the branches of the old oak tree, catching the amber dew on the blades of your lawn. Just moments ago, the air was alive. A chorus of sparrows, finches, and robins fluttered around your feeder, cracking sunflower seeds, chasing each other in chaotic bursts of energy, painting the quiet suburban morning with frantic, beautiful life. You step away for just a moment to pour a cup of coffee. When you look back through the glass, an absolute silence has fallen. The feeder swings gently in the breeze, completely vacant. Every single bird has vanished. There is no warning. There is no sound of scattering wings. It is as if an invisible eraser swept across your yard, wiping the canvas clean in the blink of an eye. You look up at the sky, scanning the tree line, searching the rooftops, but there is nothing. Just empty air and a strange, heavy stillness. Most people assume they simply flew off to find food elsewhere, but what if I told you they never actually left? What if right now, hidden inches away from where you are standing, hundreds of living creatures are watching you in total, absolute silence, and you have no idea how they pulled it off? Think about your daily routine. Every single day, you notice patterns in the world around you. You know when the mail arrives, when the neighborhood children walk home from school, and when the birds visit your yard. You treat their presence as a comforting background fixture of your environment, a predictable rhythm of nature. But have you ever stopped to track the exact geometry of their disappearance? Most people don't realize that this isn't random wandering. It happens with clockwork precision right under our noses across millions of backyards simultaneously. For centuries, human beings have watched birds vanish into the thickets or dissolve into the afternoon sky, chalking it up to simple migration, changing weather, or the routine search for shelter. We look at a bird as a fragile, simple creature reacting purely on blind instinct to the immediate environment. But reality is far more intricate and, honestly, far more unsettling. When a flock of seemingly carefree songbirds suddenly evaporates from your garden, they're not just flying away. They're executing a hyper-coordinated ancient protocol. They enter a state of sensory suppression and tactical synchronization that defies our basic understanding of animal behavior. Consider what is actually happening in those moments of sudden emptiness. The airwaves above your house are filled with silent communications, high-frequency alarms, and polarized light signals that bounce through the canopy, invisible to human eyes and ears. We walk through our yards completely blind to the invisible drama unfolding around us. We think we own the space, that our fences and manicured lawns define the boundaries of our world. Yet overlapping our reality is a parallel universe of high-stakes survival, where millions of small animals execute complex, silent maneuvers every single day, leaving us standing alone with our coffee, wondering where the world went. This isn't just a quirky piece of nature trivia. It forces us to confront a profound truth about how little we actually perceive of the living world vibrating just centimeters away from our skin. We live our lives trapped inside human bubbles, moving through concrete and glass, assuming that because we cannot see something, it does not exist. When you understand the mechanics behind the daily bird disappearance, your entire perspective on nature shifts. You will never look at an empty tree branch or a quiet garden the same way again. You will begin to realize that the world is infinitely more complex, observant, and deeply strategic than we are ever taught to believe. By the time we reach the end of this journey, you will see the invisible architecture governing the wildlife in your neighborhood, and you will understand the breathtaking hidden defense mechanisms that keep the wild alive right in front of us. Before we pull back the curtain on this hidden world, if you have ever stared out your window wondering where the wildlife went, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There are layers to our everyday environment waiting to be uncovered, and you won't want to miss what we reveal next. To understand why the yard turns into a ghost town, we have to travel back millions of years, deep into the evolutionary crucible, where the ancestors of modern songbirds forged their survival strategies. Modern humans look at a backyard bird feeder as a safe haven, a generous gift of thistle and sunflower seeds placed in a calm suburban sanctuary. But to a sparrow's ancient genetic memory, an open feeding platform is the most dangerous place on Earth. Imagine you are a creature weighing less than an ounce, metabolizing food at a blistering pace just to keep your heart beating at a staggering 500 beats per minute. Every single second spent out in the open, pecking at a bright white seed, is a calculated gamble with death. For millions of years, avian evolution was shaped entirely by the constant, unyielding pressure of apex aerial and terrestrial predators. Hawks, falcons, stealthy cats, and climbing serpents sculpted a nervous system wired not for comfort, but for absolute, instantaneous hypervigilance. When a flock gathers at a feeding site, a complex social hierarchy takes hold. While most individuals focus on feeding, designated sentinels remain perched at the highest available vantage points, scanning the horizon for the slightest deviation in the visual field. But what triggers the sudden total disappearance of the entire flock isn't always a physical predator swooping in for the kill. Often it is a micro-shift in environmental pressure, a sudden drop in barometric pressure, a subtle polarization shift in the midday sunlight, or an ultra-low frequency sound wave known as an infrasound pulse generated by distant weather fronts or large moving objects. When these ancient sensory triggers fire in the avian brain, it bypasses conscious thought entirely. It triggers an involuntary, hardwired behavioral cascade known to behavioral biologists as flock-wide freeze and sink. In a fraction of a millisecond, every bird ceases vocalization, flattens its posture against the nearest branch or structural shadow, and compresses its brilliant plumage against its body to eliminate visual contrast. They don't fly away. They vanish right where they sit by completely neutralizing every single element of their physical signature. The bright yellow finch you were watching a second ago hasn't migrated to the next county. It has transformed its body into an inert, leaf-like silhouette, holding its breath in absolute, paralyzing stillness. It is a masterclass in biological camouflage, honed by millions of years of life and death, executed seamlessly in your own backyard. While evolutionary history loads the weapon, the immediate catalyst for the daily disappearance is often found in the invisible physics of our local environment. We tend to view the weather and the atmosphere as uniform. If it is 70 degrees and sunny in your yard, it is 70 degrees and sunny everywhere around you. But to a small bird navigating urban and suburban landscapes, the environment is a chaotic, shifting patchwork of microclimates, thermal currents, and invisible atmospheric boundaries. Think about the physical structure of a typical neighborhood. You have expanses of asphalt parking lots, concrete driveways, manicured lawns, dense garden hedges, and towering architectural structures. Each of these surfaces absorbs, traps, and radiates solar heat at completely different rates throughout the morning and afternoon. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, these thermal gradients create localized microcurrents of rising and sinking air that are entirely imperceptible to human skin, yet act as violent, unpredictable winds for a creature weighing only a few grams. At a specific point during the day, often late morning or early afternoon, these thermal shifts create what meteorologists call a boundary layer inversion, where warm air rushes upward and pulls heavier, cooler air down into the lower canopy. For small birds, this sudden atmospheric shift alters the acoustic properties of their environment. Sound travels differently through these shifting air pockets, making it significantly harder to hear approaching danger while simultaneously making their own calls echo loudly across open spaces. Instantly, their sensory equilibrium is shattered. To compensate, the entire local population executes a synchronized tactical retreat into unseen sanctuary pockets. These pockets are hyper-specific microhabitats, the dense, impenetrable core of an overgrown arbor vitae hedge, the dark, shadowed overhang beneath a residential deck, or the cool, damp hollow of an old, rotting stump. Inside these sanctuary pockets, the temperature drops, the chaotic wind currents die down, and the acoustic glare of the suburban neighborhood is entirely muffled by thick foliage and dense wood. When you look out and see an empty yard, you are witnessing the direct result of an invisible, atmospheric migration. The birds haven't abandoned their territory. They have simply retreated behind the veil of a microclimate boundary, waiting out the turbulent midday hours in absolute shaded silence until the atmosphere stabilizes and the invisible doors of the sanctuary open once again. If atmospheric shifts and ancient evolutionary fears push birds into hiding, modern human civilization actively turns that hiding mechanism into an absolute necessity. We live in a world saturated with sensory noise, the low, constant hum of highway traffic, the mechanical drone of air conditioning units, the sharp clatter of lawnmowers, and the invisible web of digital radio frequencies cutting through the air. To human ears, We filter out much of this urban cacophony as background noise. But to the hypersensitive auditory and tactile nervous system of a wild bird, modern suburbia is a sensory war zone. Avian hearing is extraordinarily sophisticated. They can detect frequencies and timing variations in sound that are entirely beyond human comprehension, allowing them to communicate across vast distances using subtle modulations in pitch and tempo. However, this evolutionary superpower becomes a profound vulnerability in the modern human landscape. Low-frequency anthropogenic noise, the deep rumble of a garbage truck miles away, or the constant vibration of heavy traffic mimics the acoustic signature of natural disasters, approaching storms and large, terrifying apex predators. As the morning progresses and human activity reaches its peak, the cumulative buildup of this low-frequency noise pollution bombards the avian brain, triggering a state of chronic sensory overload and acute anxiety. Their neurological systems become flooded with stress hormones, specifically corticosterone, pushing them past their threshold of tolerance. In behavioral psychology, this is known as a sensory deprivation trap. The environment becomes so chemically and acoustically hostile that the only way for the organism to protect its delicate cognitive functions is to completely shut down input. This is why the daily disappearance often coincides with the peak hours of human activity. The birds aren't just hiding from a hawk in the sky. They are retreating from an invisible wall of noise that is tearing through their sensory organs. They slip away into dense thickets, not merely to hide, but to find acoustic shadows pockets of space where the dense architecture of plants and soil dampens the agonizing vibrations of the human world. In those quiet hideaways, their heart rates drop back down to sustainable levels, their nervous systems reset, and they wait in meditative stillness for the human world to quiet down, proving that the midday vanishing act is as much a psychological retreat from our modern noise as it is a tactical survival maneuver. When we watch birds throughout the day, we make the fundamental mistake of viewing them as independent, disconnected actors, individual creatures landing on a branch, flying away, and returning at random. But behind the apparent chaos of backyard life lies a sophisticated, highly organized tactical choreography that rivals the most advanced military maneuvers known to humankind. What looks like a random scattering of birds is actually a synchronized shadow migration executed with astonishing precision. Throughout the early morning hours, as birds forage across lawns and gardens, they are constantly updating a shared collective spatial map. This is managed through subtle visual cues. A quick flick of a tail, a sudden shift in head angle, or a microburst of low-amplitude vocalization. Every individual in the local population is plugged into this decentralized network, constantly assessing resource distribution and collective risk levels. When the collective threat threshold is reached, there is no leader who gives a command. Instead, a phase transition occurs, much like water turning instantly into ice. Within a single second, the entire flock undergoes a synchronized behavioral phase shift. This is what researchers call edge-following tactical deployment. Rather than flying upward into the vulnerable open sky where aerial predators can spot them, the birds drop low, hugging the ground contour, slipping behind fences, skimming along the base of garden walls, and funneling into predetermined, highly guarded collective roosting corridors. These corridors are secret highways of dense vegetation and structural cover that humans rarely notice or walk through. Inside these hidden corridors, the flock reorganizes into complex, multi-tiered defensive formations. The more experienced, dominant adults take up positions on the outer perimeter of the roosting pocket to act as a living shield, while the younger, more vulnerable fledglings are packed securely into the deepest, safest interior core. They huddle together so tightly that body heat is shared across the entire group, turning a collection of vulnerable individuals into a singular, cohesive superorganism capable of weathering any sudden environmental or predatory threat. This shadow migration happens right under eyes every single day, utilizing the forgotten corners of our landscapes. The narrow gap between a shed and a fence, the underside of a dense evergreen bough to execute a massive relocation without a single human ever realizing a migration took place. Beneath behavior, beneath atmospheric shifts, and beneath sensory overload lies the most fundamental clockwork of all, the internal biological machinery of the avian body. Every living organism on Earth is governed by circadian rhythms, internal biochemical clocks tied to the rotation of the planet. synchronized primarily by the changing angles of sunlight and the invisible, shifting geometry of Earth's magnetic field. But what most people do not realize is that these circadian rhythms are not a simple, smooth 24-hour loop. They are punctuated by sharp, high-intensity biological reset points throughout the day. As the sun arcs across the sky, it alters the polarization of natural light filtering through the atmosphere. To human eyes, daylight just gets brighter and then dimmer. But avian eyes possess specialized ultraviolet photoreceptors that allow them to see the exact polarization patterns of light, acting as a living compass and an ultra-precise chronometer. At specific times during the day, often coinciding with the midday hours when birds seemingly vanish, the polarization angle of sunlight reaches a critical inflection point, triggering a massive wave of hormonal activity deep within the avian pineal gland and hypothalamus. Simultaneously, minute fluctuations in subterranean magnetic fields driven by solar wind interactions with the upper atmosphere pulse across the planet's surface. While humans remain entirely oblivious to these magnetic tides, migratory and resident birds possess cryptochrome proteins in their eyes and neural tissue that react directly to these magnetic shifts. When a significant magnetic or light polarization anomaly occurs, it induces a temporary neurological state akin to mild sensory disorientation. To protect themselves from this brief window of vulnerability, the bird's internal programming demands an immediate halt to all active foraging and open-air exposure. Their biological clocks effectively hit a mandatory pause button. The birds retreat into shadow, lower their metabolic output, and enter a state of shallow, wakeful torpor mini-hibernation that conserves energy and shields their magnetically sensitive nervous systems from environmental interference. This biological shutdown explains why even if you place fresh food out during these mysterious hours, the feeder remains untouched. The birds aren't ignoring the food because they aren't hungry. Their internal biological clock has temporarily locked down their feeding drive, overriding all external temptation in obedience to an ancient celestial rhythm written deep inside their DNA. As the afternoon sun begins its slow amber descent toward the horizon, the atmosphere in your backyard undergoes a subtle, almost electric transformation. The heavy, stagnant stillness that defined the midday hours starts to fracture. Deep inside the dense, hidden sanctuary pockets the overgrown hedges, the dark structural overhangs, and a cool subterranean hollows. A silent awakening is underway. The collective superorganism begins to stir, shifting its weight from foot to foot, stretching cramped wings, and recalibrating its internal compasses to the changing angle of the evening sun. You might notice a single tentative chirp echoing from the depths of the evergreen tree, quickly silenced as if someone instantly clamped a hand over the singer's beak. Then another sound emerges, a rapid low-frequency click, bouncing invisibly through the undergrowth, passing tactical status updates back and forth across the hidden network. The invisible architecture of the neighborhood is shifting once again. The boundary layers are collapsing. The acoustic noise of the human world is beginning to fade as evening traffic quiets down and the magnetic tides are realigning. The stage is set for the grand finale of the daily cycle. The birds are no longer hiding from the world. They are preparing to re-emerge, but they will not do so blindly. They are about to execute the most complex, breathtaking maneuver of their daily existence, a coordinated explosion of life that shatters the silence of the afternoon and bridges the gap between the hidden shadow world and the open sky above your head, revealing the true scale of the ecosystem sharing your space. And then, with the suddenness of a lightning strike, it happens. Without a single warning sound, the entire landscape erupts. From the dark, forgotten core of the hedge, from beneath the rotting deck, from the invisible shadows of the rooftop corners, hundreds of birds detonate into the open air simultaneously. It is not a gradual trickle, but a violent, hyper-synchronized shockwave of motion. They burst outward in a unified, swirling cloud, carving geometric patterns through the golden evening light with terrifying speed and precision. For a few breathtaking seconds, the sky above your yard is alive with a living vortex of wings, twisting and turning as one single organism with 1,000 minds, moving with an agility that defies physics. This is the grand synchronization, the ultimate proof that while they were gone, they were never truly scattered. They were operating as a single, unified intelligence, waiting in the dark for the exact mathematical microsecond to reclaim the sky. As the vortex settles and they disperse back to the trees to feed one last time before dusk, you are left standing in the yard with your breath caught in your throat, staring at a sky that is suddenly, miraculously full again, hit with the staggering realization of what was happening just inches away from you all along. You step back inside, closing the glass door behind you, and look out once more at your quiet backyard. The afternoon sun casts long amber shadows across the lawn, and the feeder gently sways in the evening breeze. To anyone else, it is just a peaceful, ordinary scene at the end of a long day. But now, you see the invisible architecture beneath the surface. You know that the emptiness you felt earlier wasn't an absence of life, but a masterclass in survival, a secret, parallel world of shadow migrations, microclimates, and ancient evolutionary instincts unfolding quietly right outside your window. The birds are there, even when they are gone, quietly orchestrating a complex, beautiful drama that we are only just beginning to understand. What is the strangest thing you have ever witnessed in your backyard when you thought no one was watching? Drop your story in the comments below.